Hello and welcome to BitTorrent Hacks. We are pirates and we like BitTorrent.
Yar.
Yar. Our motivation for this project is to improve the BitTorrent protocol. And a part of that is to educate people on its weaknesses.
My name is David Aslanian, and I'm a programmer, and I test avionics software. Many of you may have flown on products that I test.
My name is Michael Brooks, and this is my trophy room. This is my Millworm page. My number is 677. The BitTorrent protocol is now 7 years old. The protocol has become widely successful in a very short period of time. But with the success comes growing pains. The protocol, originally envisioned by Bram Cohen, is fairly secure. Vulnerabilities have been introduced by people trying to do things with the protocol that it was never meant to do, such as private networks and encryption. Most vulnerabilities are identified by a common vulnerability and exposure, CVE number. More than 37,000 vulnerabilities are classified by the system. Most CVE numbers fall into specific categories, given a common weakness enumeration number, or CWE. For instance, all SQL injection numbers are classified by CWE 89. In the current BitTorrent specification, there are 3 CWE violations. In order to understand the vulnerabilities, you must first understand the protocol.
All right. All data used in BitTorrent communication is B-encoded. The two simple data types are strings and integers, both of which you can see encoded examples of here. Integers can be of any size. They start with an I and end with an E. Strings can contain any characters, even binary, and as you can see in the example, they start with a number that is their length. The next data type that you can see is a list. This example shows a list that contains one number and 2 strings. Pretty simple. The fourth and final data type is a dictionary. This dictionary contains a single integer and 2 strings. Dictionaries access their members using strings, whereas lists use a numerical index. These 4 data types can be used together to make other more complex data types, such as an abstract data tree. For instance, the first step in starting a torrent is obtaining the .torrent file. A .torrent file uses B encoding to build a data tree, such as what you're seeing. This is an abstract data type similar to the directory structure of a file system. A couple things to notice here. All of the leaf nodes in this tree are either integers or strings. You can see about halfway down the announced list subtree, which specifies the list of trackers that this torrent will be able to connect to. Also notice the pieces part of the info subtree. It contains SHA-1 hashes of the chunks of the file that will be transferred. The pieces field is usually much longer, but it's truncated here for display purposes. Every torrent file is identified by what they call an info hash, and it's a SHA-1 hash of the info subtree, as you can see here highlighted in yellow. Note that the list of trackers, as well as other information contained in the torrent file, can change without the info hash ever changing. Immediately after opening a torrent file, your BitTorrent client is going to send a scrape request to the tracker. The scrape request is an HTTP GET. The tracker responds with statistics about the torrent file, including the number of people who are downloading it, in addition to how many people are seeding and leeching. Next, your BitTorrent client sends an announce request to the tracker. The announce request sends more information about your client. For instance, in this announce request, the event is started and 0 bytes have been uploaded and downloaded. The announce request also specifies the peer ID of the client, which uniquely identifies the client. Also notice the port number, which the tracker will use when identifying this client in the announce response. This is the announce response. The announce response gives the client a list of peers. The peers are not B encoded, as you can see. Instead, they're an in binary. It's a representation of the IP addresses and port numbers of the peers that are available for the torrent file. Now that the BitTorrent client has a list of peers, it begins a series of handshakes to establish a connection with other peers in the swarm. The first outgoing packet of a handshake is a UDP ping request. This is the UDP ping request. This is the response to the UDP ping request. At this point, the BitTorrent client knows that the remote peer is available and that it's not firewalled or behind a NAT or otherwise unreachable. There are many other UDP packets that will be sent before file transfer actually will begin. In addition, there are extensions to the BitTorrent protocol that allow additional communications such as chat or other features to occur after the handshake is complete.
BitTorrent was never meant to be an exclusive protocol. As a result, two vulnerabilities were created. The first vulnerability falls under CWE 602, Client-Side Enforcement of Server-Side Security, otherwise known as Client-Side Trust. With every announce request, the client is expected to report how much they have uploaded and downloaded, and how much is remaining to download. Private BitTorrent networks use these announce requests to enforce a share ratio. For instance, some private BitTorrent networks will pose a 50% ratio, in which you must upload at least half as much as you download. The tools used to spoof this information are well known. They send spoofed HTTP GET requests, informing the tracker that the client has uploaded data, when in fact no data has been transferred. Ratio Master is an example of the spoof client. However, some BitTorrent communities have been able to detect this method. A more difficult to detect method is that the BitTorrent client lies to the tracker, saying that it hasn't transferred any data. In addition, the client never reports that the torrent is completed. From the tracker's perspective, the BitTorrent client is unable to contact other people in the swarm, which could happen under legitimate conditions. As a result, the bandwidth ratio stays a constant, and you can download as much as you want. The BitTorrent client to accomplish this is called Stealth Bomber, and it's on the CD. I created this client by modifying the original Python BitTorrent 5.22 client written by Bram Cohen. The Stealth Bomber is open source. Anyway, as a side note, while working on this code base, I found this great code quote. This function is a boat made of shit floating on a river of shit. Okay, Immortal Sessions. All private BitTorrent communities are vulnerable to CWE 384, session fixation, which ranks in at number 7 on the OWASP top 10. All BitTorrent clients authenticate with private trackers using a session ID sent as a GET parameter. This value cannot be changed because there isn't a system in the protocol to notify the BitTorrent client of a new session ID. The session ID is a part of the announced URL inside the .torrent file. One could exploit this vulnerability by sniffing the network for announce requests or .torrent files. Another tried-and-true method is XSS in the web application. Due to the session fixation vulnerability, SQL injection in the tracker leads to immediate access without needing to break the password hash. The most popular private BitTorrent community codebase is tbdev, and the MD5 password hash is used as the Immortal Session ID. Password hashes should always be kept secret. The hashing of passwords is meant to be a last line of defense after the database has been compromised, but many programmers do not understand this principle. DMCA bots. Another client-side issue is that the number of seeds for a torrent is calculated by looking at the number of announce requests that have recently set an event as completed. It is trivial to inflate this number by forging announce requests. Just because a torrent has a lot of seeds doesn't mean it's good. In fact, the file could be a DMCA trap. Announce requests are important to anti-piracy software. As a show of hands, who here has gotten a DMCA violation? Not one? You guys aren't pirates. Wow. Okay. These automated bots will download torrent files of copyrighted material in question, and then periodically contact the announce server, obtaining a list of IP addresses. The DMCA bots will connect to you, pretending to be a normal BitTorrent client, and then attempt to download a chunk of the copyrighted file as evidence to use in court. Peer Guardian is a popular peer-to-peer plugin that prevents you from contacting two known DMCA bots. Peer Guardian is similar to a real-time blacklist used to fight spam. I don't like Peer Guardian at all. IP addresses are very cheap, and proxy servers are free. Unfortunately, the safest method to avoid anti-piracy bots is to use private BitTorrent networks. Demonoid is invite-only. However, Demonoid users will get DMCA violations because the community is too open. Waffles.fm and what.cd, on the other hand, are very exclusive, and I don't think any one of these communities will ever get a DMCA violation. The third vulnerability to affect BitTorrent falls under CWE 300, channel accessible by non-endpoint, or better known as man in the middle. This vulnerability is in the Message Stream Encryption Protocol, or MSE, used for BitTorrent encryption. This is not the first security problem discovered that affects MSE. A company by the name of IPOC is able to detect and throttle MSE traffic using deep packet inspection. Furthermore, a research paper entitled Attacks on Message Stream Encryption goes over many problems in MSE. The biggest problem with this paper is that many of the attacks discussed are highly theoretical and may not be possible in the real world. To make matters worse, no source code has been provided or to prove or otherwise verify any of the attacks presented in the paper. I think this is a common practice of academics. They talk about security problems and they don't write exploit code. On the con CD, there's proof of concept code that I wrote that will show that MSE man-in-the-middle attacks are possible. MSE relies on three cryptographic primitives. First, it uses a Diffie-Hellman key exchange, shown in the top of this slide. This is to establish a shared secret between both parties. The secret is concatenated at the end of key A, which is a static string towards the bottom of this slide. Finally, the info hash of the .torrent file is concatenated to the end. This entire string is then, a SHA-1 hash is taken of this entire string, and that is your key. There are a few problems with this. I'm not sure why they chose to use key A as a static string, but I suspect that it has to do with defending against the SHA-1 prefixing attack. One problem. Prefixing attacks would not affect this protocol because the original hash itself isn't known. So you don't know what you'd be trying to create a collision for. I think this is a mistake made by a novice. What is lacking from this protocol is proper authentication. SSL, for instance, uses a public key infrastructure, or PKI, to verify who you're communicating with. In fact, unauthenticated SSL is very similar to MSE. Both use DH key exchanges, both can use RC4, and more importantly, both are vulnerable to man-in-the-middle attacks.
All right, speaking of unauthenticated SSL, all of these BitTorrent clients that you can see here have a completely broken SSL implementation. When communicating over SSL, they don't even bother to verify their certificate. You can see part of a pop-up from views here. Sorry about the layout, but what the dialog says is, it originally says, would you like to trust this invalid certificate? And what views is really saying in this case is, would you like to get owned? And unfortunately, I think the answer from most users would be yes. They really would not understand what all this nonsense about an invalid certificate would mean to them. Views also fails to check their certificate, but rather claims that all certificates are invalid, which is just as bad. These are not problems in the SSL library that Views is using. It's just implemented incorrectly, and it's a big problem.
Views is like the X-Files, trust no one. So what are the solution to all these problems? MSE should have never been built. Let me be very clear. MSE was built by people who do not fully understand the cryptographic systems they are using. MSE is wasteful of resources and does not provide the type of protection that the authors desired. In fact, the solution to traffic shaping and keeping your data secret existed long before BitTorrent. The answer is SSL, which is now called TLS. While at Black Hat this year, I saw Moxie's lead hacks against SSL TLS, but I still think SSL is a great protocol. It definitely needs some major patches. TLS, or Transport Layer Security, is the solution, and should have been used from the very beginning. TLS is an encrypted tunnel of OSI layer 4, otherwise known as the transport layer. This means that it doesn't matter what the application layer looks like. The traffic will be indistinguishable to the attacker. If BitTorrent uses TLS, then ISPs cannot disrupt it without affecting HTTPS or other TLS-dependent protocols. To make disruption even more difficult, clients can change their communication port to 443, or another port commonly used by TLS. However, in more extreme cases such as Iran, encrypted communication is indiscriminately blocked. In this case, powerful stenography is the best hope for bypass. A very important feature of TLS is that it supports the ability to resume handshakes. This makes it so that only one handshake is required per user in the swarm, even though clients are continually connecting and disconnecting from each other. Resuming TLS handshakes is an important part of FTP over TLS. I suspect that the authors of MSE didn't know this property of TLS, which could have been their motivation for reinventing the wheel. Another important feature of TLS is that both server and client can verify each other's identity. This addresses the session fixation issue described earlier between client and tracker. BitTorrent clients could also authenticate with other peers in the swarm. This is an effective means of securing private BitTorrent swarms from outsiders. But who would be the certificate of authority? VeriSign doesn't support piracy, and their trust is expensive. Furthermore, I don't trust VeriSign, but we all are forced to. The best solution is that the BitTorrent tracker could be a certificate authority. The tracker could detect malicious behavior and then revoke certificates immediately, or rather, they will be revoked as soon as Moxie's OC-SP bypass vulnerability is patched. I recommend the use of OpenCA. It is free and simple to use. With minor modifications, I believe it could be an effective certificate authority for BitTorrent networks. Thank you. Are there any questions? Comments? Anything? All right, well, one in the back. The pirate's favorite letter? All right, well, thank you for coming to my talk. Have a great day.